So we are not technically finishing up the books of history, but finishing up the books of history that I care to cover right now. Technically, Esther is part of the books of history, but Esther is a different kind of a book. So I'm going to kind of recap what we talked about. So when we read from, oh boy, from Joshua all the way through Second Kings, that was one timeline, beginning to end, and it started from the entrance into the Holy Land through the exile in Babylon. And then Chronicles does the same thing, but does it much quicker. So Chronicles covers most of the same time period, but just does it in a couple books. And now we have Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra and Nehemiah are special books, and I never realized this. I'm going to be honest. My deficiencies as a pastor. I don't know the history of every single book in the Bible. Sorry, but I'm learning, right? So Ezra and Nehemiah are really the only books of history that cover the time from the exile after the exile. So after they came back from the exile in Babylon.
Right.
And they're both written. They're not exactly one after the other, but they're sort of. They overlap a little bit, but Ezra is right after and during when people are just coming back from exile, and Nehemiah is a later. The interesting thing about the two of them is they are written from different perspectives. Ezra is one of the high priests of the temple, and so it's all about reestablishing not just the temple, but the morality of the people, right? Nehemiah is an early governor of Judea, and so it's much more. It's more layman's term, lay terms, like, but not the pastor, but the people, right? So it's sort of different language, even though Nehemiah is still a very faithful person that starts off with Nehemiah prays for his people, but it's more of a leader of the people rather than a priest. And I personally find it fascinating because the whole concept of all of the landowners and all of the wealthy and the rulers being taken away from the land for generation or two is fascinating. What happens? What's the kind of vacuum that happens when they leave, and what's the kind of power struggle that happens when their descendants come back? So as we finished Ezra last week, we had a few of those. Part of the readings kind of covered some of that stuff, and then Nehemiah will cover some of that as well. So I think it's very interesting. Like, just imagine if everybody if all of I'm not even gonna say billionaires, if all the millionaires in the U.S. suddenly were taken to another land, who you think, well, that great, good riddance. I'm like, but you're taking all of the people that own the companies and the corporations and land and stuff,
and run things.
And what would happen? I think it would be a problem.
Yeah.
So, and then when they come back and they say, "Hey, I own that. Why'd you take over my company? I own that." Well, you've been gone. In fact, it's not even you. Your dad owned it, but you come back 70 years and say you own this business. It's just interesting how they could, because they also don't have official records. If someone says, "This is my land, this is my home," prove it. They had no way to prove it. It's just amazing to me that they're able to restore any kind of society afterwards.
Yeah, but Jan, I had a friend that was from Lebanon, and she said that attitude is still quite prevalent even today in the Middle East.
I just noticed my internet looks like it's slowing down for some reason. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're gonna take 2 weeks to read Nehemiah, and then I'm leaving you. So
I'm really gonna miss you. I already miss you.
You have no right to miss me, Judy Johnson. You left me.
I know I did. Now you're leaving me.
Now,
Now she's leaving all of us. And then he even has to do a funeral before he leaves.
This is proof. This is proof that we're friends. That we'll always be friends because you're showing up the Bible study
Yeah.
after you. You didn't hear what happened. We should be doing the Bible study, and people that are watching this are going to say, "Why are we talking about this?" So we had 19 visitors in church on Sunday.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
We had 19
Yes.
visitors.
Wow.
Yes.
And 10 of them were from one family who asked me to do a funeral tomorrow.
Oh, that's where your funeral
So, yeah, it's crazy.
I
Anyway,
didn't even
Nehemiah.
recognize that name.
Oh, you would know. You might know them. They are,
Jinx.
The Jinx family. Roman and
JNKS, Judy.
they were members through to 2006.
That's right about the time that I first came.
So yeah, it would have been just when you left. Yeah. So let's read Nehemiah. The words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah, in the month of Chislev in the 20th year, while I was in Susa, the capital, one of my brothers, Hanani, came with certain men from Judah. And I asked them about the Jews that survived, those who had escaped the captivity, and about Jerusalem. They replied that survivors there in the province who escaped captivity are in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. When I heard these words, I sat down and wept, and mourned for days, fasting and praying before the God of heaven. I said, O God, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant, that I now pray before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel, confessing the sins of the people of Israel which we have sinned against you. Both I and my family have sinned. We have offended you deeply, failing to keep the commandments, the statutes, and the ordinances that you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the word that you peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are under the farthest skies, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place at which I have chosen to establish my name. They are your servants and your people, whom you redeemed by your great power and your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servants and to the prayers of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give success to your servant today and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. At the time, I was cupbearer to the king. So he's saying a prayer for those that have returned from exile. And he was probably he probably had, is a Jew who probably had, the king is not the king of Israel, but the king of Persia. So he was some kind of slave. He was released also, become some kind of slave to the king of Persia. So he had some relatively important position, even as a Jew. So it's basically a memoir of Nehemiah's. It says Nehemiah, a Jew, had risen to high office in the Persian administration. So in the time that during the exile, he was an advisor, a taster of the king's wine and guard of the royal apartment. It would no doubt have great personal influence on the king's decisions. So it may be that, it doesn't say that, it may be that he had some influence on them actually being released from captivity too. Interesting.
What are you reading from?
I just read the first chapter of the book.
Yeah, right, but you were adding some things to it.
Oh, it's just notes that I have below in my Bible.
Thank you. That's all I wanted.
Yeah. I have some like notes on different things.
Okay,
I have a study Bible that
thank you.
so it makes me wonder if he had some say in, the people being released from captivity, which is kind
Yeah.
of cool to think about.
Yeah.
So in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was served him, I carried the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had never been sad in his presence before, so the king said to me, "Why is your face sad since you are not sick? This can only be sadness of the heart." Then I was very much afraid. I said to the king, "May the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my ancestors' graves, lies waste, and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" And the king said to me, "What do you request?" So I prayed to the God of heaven. Then I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor with you, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my ancestors' graves, so that I may rebuild it." The king said to me, the queen was also sitting beside him, "How long will you be gone, and when will you return?" So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a date. Then I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, let letters be given me to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may grant me passage until I arrive in Judah, and a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, directing him to give me timber to make beams for the gates of the temple fortress, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall occupy." And the king granted me what I asked, for the gracious hand of my God was upon me. Then I came to the governors of the province beyond the river and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent officers of the army and cavalry with me. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard this, it displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. So I think we had a little bit of that at the end of Ezra, that the Ammonites are attacking Israel because they see it as sort of being weak. And so he is coming to help. In that sense, this does repeat immediately after the events of Ezra. There's an element here that's interesting to me, that when it says that the slaves were released, Israel is still under Persian control, right? They didn't give them their land back. They just released them to their land because they have Persian governors in the land at this time. So Babylon is still controlling the area. They just let the people go back to where they had come from, which is interesting to me. That he's asking to go back to the place. What was the part near the beginning? Yeah. Basically, the governors of that area they answer to the Persian king, which means that it's still under their control. That will change eventually, but I didn't realize that still existed later on. So verse 11. So I came to Jerusalem and was there for 3 days. Then I got up during the night, I and a few men with me. I told no one what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. The only animal I took was the animal I rode. I went out by night to the valley gate, past the dragon spring, and to the dung gate, and I expected the walls of Jerusalem that had been broken down and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. Then I went on to the fountain gate into the king's pool, but there was no place for the animal I was riding to continue. So I went up by way of the valley by night and inspected the wall. Then I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the rest that were to do the work. So he rode around the city inspecting the walls. And it sounds like the rebuilding the city was he's remember, this is kind of a memoir, right? He's sort of making it seem like it's only his idea to rebuild the city. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But he's bringing materials and he's going to be directing them to do the work. Okay. Then I said to them, "You see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, so that we may no longer suffer disgrace." I told them the hand of my God had been gracious upon me, and also the words that the king had spoken to me. Then they said, "Let us start building." So they committed themselves to the common good. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official and Geshem the Arab heard of it, they mocked and ridiculed us, saying, "What is this that you are doing? Are you rebelling against the king?" Then I replied to them, "The God of heaven is the one who will give us success, and we his servants are going to start building. But you have no share or claim or historic right in Jerusalem." Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
No historic right in Jerusalem. They're still arguing that one too.
Yes. So he drew a line in the sand. So he drew a line in the sand.
Yeah, he does. He's like, you it's funny that they said you're gonna make the king mad, and like, no, the king told me I could do this, so leave me alone. You're the one that destroyed they're fighting amongst themselves is the problem. So this chapter is, my Bible says it's probably not part of the original memoir. It might have been added later on, but it talks about the actual physical part of building the wall. Then the high priest Eliashib set to work with his fellow priests and rebuilt the sheep gate. He consecrated it and set up its doors. He consecrated it as far as the Tower of the 100 and as far as the Tower of Hananel. And the men of Jericho built next to him, and next to them Zakur, son of Imri, built. The sons of Hassanah built the fish gate. They laid its beams and set up its doors, its bolts, and its bars. Next to them, Meremoth, son of Uriah, son of Hakaz, made repairs. Next to them, Meshullam, son of Berechiah, son of Meshabel, made repairs. Next to them, Zadok, son of Bana, made repairs. Next to them, the Tokites made repairs, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work of the Lord. I love that the families all sort of take a section of the wall. It's kind of neat. Joiada, son of Paseah, and Meshullam, son of Besodeah, repaired the old gate. They laid its beams and set up its doors, its bolts, and its bars. Next to them, repairs were made by Melatiah the Gibeonite and Jadon the Meronothite, the men of Gibeon and of Mizpah, who were under the jurisdiction of the governor of the province beyond the river. Next to them, Uzziel, son of Harhiah, one of the goldsmiths, made repairs. Next to him, Hananiah, one of the perfumers, made repairs. A perfumer. We have a perfumer and a goldsmith making repairs to the wall. I love that.
Yeah.
And they restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. Next to them, Raphiah, son of Hur, ruler of half the district of Jerusalem, made repairs. Next to them, Jediah, son of Harumph. That's funny. Harumph. Anyway, made repairs opposite his house. I'm going to skip part of this. One of the things that I think is really neat is a few times in this chapter it says that they consecrated it. Well, they basically did a blessing, did a service of worship to like we would do at a funeral, or blessing of the animals or something like that, right?
Or dedicating a new church building. Or dedicating a new church building.
Yeah, exactly, that kind of a thing. Yeah, very kind of neat to see that. We're still doing the same kinds of things, you know. Okay, go a little bit further here. I'm gonna go a lot further. Now, when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged, and he mocked the Jews. He said in the presence of, this is chapter 4, by the way, I skipped ahead a little bit.